What's up, nerds? Throughout this video, we'll be exploring the idea that Misha is actually the Watchmaker of Penacony. Now, you might already be able to tell the vibe that I found a series of clues that link Misha and the Watchmaker together, but I have found one clue in specific that is non-refutable and directly links Misha with the Watchmaker in some way, shape, or form. I will start out by pointing out arguably the most important and biggest clue that link the Watchmaker and Misha together, but I firstly wanted to say that there are a lot of things that link them together, so I would recommend sticking around for the whole thing so that I can kind of paint the whole picture here for you. And it was Einstein that said, "Through 2 points in space, there always passes one and only one straight line." So keep in mind that through all of the clues that I've found so far in this video, they all link to only one person, and that is Misha. Let me know in the comments if you have found any other things that link to anyone else, but so far it's only going to one person. Alright, so 2 really important pieces of information that directly link Misha and the Watchmaker together. First, I need to show you this piece right here from Misha's character story part 3. I'll spare you this entire thing, I'll just read you the important part. And then I need to show you one other piece from the Watchmaker set itself, the relic set. And you won't understand that part, which is the true smoking gun, until I show you this right here. So let's read this first. Captain, in reference to Misha, because yes, throughout all of Misha's story and their lore, they are referred to as a captain, which is, yes, a leadership role, something far more important than a bellboy. But anyways, Captain, wake up. It's clearing up. He rubbed his eyes and looked incredulously at the sight before him. A golden pocket watch, which had transformed into a figure with arms and legs, dressed in a uniform and a red bow tie, beckoned him over. As you might be able to have already figured out, this figure with arms, legs, dressed in a uniform and a red bow tie is literally Clockie. There's only one character in the entire game with this description, and that is Clockie. So yes, this pocket watch right here on Misha's waist turns into Clockie. Now let's take a look at the other piece. Now this excerpt here comes from the Watchmaker's relic set, specifically the Watchmaker's fortuitous wristwatch. It reads, "Why the Watchmaker is called the Watchmaker is the biggest puzzle in this serialized story." It really isn't, I'll explain in a moment, but some say he was once a craftsman at a clock tower. Some say he was once a merchant who sold timepieces. There are even those who say his head is shaped like a watch face, just like Clockie, which he created. So one important thing to note about this excerpt here is that these pieces here, the craftsman at the clock tower, merchant who sold timepieces, this is all hearsay. The one thing that is specifically not hearsay in this description is that Clockie was the Watchmaker's creation, which immediately links Misha to the Watchmaker, because Misha is likely the one who created Clockie when you look at Misha's story. Now you might want to say this last part here is hearsay as well, and part of it is. There are even those who say his head is shaped like a watch face. Obviously that sounds a bit ridiculous, and it is clearly grammatically separated from the rest, which reads just like Clockie, which he created, which is clearly separated from the rest of this paragraph to show a truth amongst all the bullshit. Now, it's important to note as well that Clockie was created by Misha through Misha's imagination, through Misha's dreams, which we find out in Misha's character lore, which I was pointing to earlier. I didn't read you literally every story amongst it, but if you read the whole thing, you will find out that Misha ended up creating a lot of different things through his dreams, and he ended up creating basically an entire world through his dreams, which is just like the Dreamscape of Penacony, which is yet another thing that alludes to Misha being the Watchmaker, who seemingly is the one who kind of created all of this stuff, created the Dreamscape and essentially everything else on Penacony. Another thing linking the Watchmaker set and Misha together are this Watchmaker set and Misha's color palette are quite literally identical. You see these, very nice looking, gold accents. You see this kind of darkened, like almost navy blue, almost a black color. This purple you see in everything, the blue, everything here is basically identical to what you would see Misha wearing, just with a slight spin. And we know from seeing some of the promotional footage for Penacony that some of the characters on Penacony, such as Aventurine, seem to have like 2 different modes. Aventurine is clearly a monstrous beast in one of the images shown for him, and in the very next frame, he's back to looking like a human-like aventurine. So the way that I look at this is that Misha, the watchmaker, likely has two different modes as well. It's also a very known thing on Penacony that the watchmaker's identity is not truly known to people. So Misha, the watchmaker, however you may want to look at that, they don't want people to know their true identity. So they wouldn't be, like, Misha would not be wearing the exact same clothes as this Watchmaker Set. They would be wearing something different to conceal their identity. And what better a way to hide your true identity than to be hiding in plain sight as a bellboy, a lowly bellboy that nobody would ever suspect. It's important to note as well Misha's obvious connection with a character named Mikhail. You might remember the name Mikhail because throughout the main story, while we were in the true dream, according to Sparkle's words, the name Mikhail was constantly spoken out through like illusions and written names on the wall. We don't know whose female voice was actually saying Mikhail's name, but Mikhail is always the character that was being referred to by this female voice. Interestingly, as the main character was falling asleep and entering the dreamscape for the first time, Mikhail's name was screamed out by a female voice. We don't know whose female voice this actually was, but for just a brief moment, Misha was flashed onto the screen while Mikhail's name was being screamed out. I found this very interesting, and it seems very apparent the developers wanted us to think about Misha when we also thought about Mikhail. Despite the connections that I will be making throughout this video, it does not necessarily guarantee that Misha and the Watchmaker are in fact the same person. It does seem rather likely, but always remain skeptical, right? So in the spirit of skepticism, I want to point out something that might contradict these ideas. However, there could be a very good explanation for that as well. We'll get into it in just a moment. Let's take a look at this. So Misha is confronted by the Trailblazer about a note that the Trailblazer found in their room the first time they entered a dreamscape. This note was left by the Watchmaker themselves, and I'll read you that note in just a moment. But Misha says, "A note, did you find it in the room? Ah, it wasn't trash left behind by the previous guest, was it?" Let's continue forward. It was my mistake. I failed to tidy up properly and caused an inconvenience for you. I'm truly sorry. Now, it's important to note that the Watchmaker does not want people to know who they really are. And so if this is really Misha, they said in the note that if the Trailblazer essentially fulfills some sort of, I guess, prerequisite, that they would be honored with an audience, right, with the Watchmaker. We have not fulfilled that yet. So Misha could be just fumbling right now and lying to us in order to kind of throw us off the trail. We did, in a conversation with Himiko, Welt, and March 7th, sort of like come up with the idea that the Watchmaker could have been the one who invited us to Penacony and may not have necessarily had good intentions behind doing that. In fact, Black Swan says to us at one point that literally everybody, including her, could be lying at any given point in time. And pretty much just about everybody has already lied to us at one point or another in the patch 2.0 main story so far, and we've only been here for like a day. So keep all of this in mind. It's also important to note that we are not given a choice during this interaction. Misha forces us, essentially, to go into the Golden Hour. There are 12 dreamscapes in Penacony, as mentioned during this interaction, but we're basically led into the Golden Hour as directed by Misha, as if Misha has ulterior motives. And why would Misha, a random bellboy, have ulterior motives? It makes no sense. Some of you might say, well, plot device, in order to get us to go into the Golden Hour, but I think it's more than just that. In fact, we meet Misha in the Golden Hour, along with Clockie, along with Acheron, along with Firefly, along with all of these different people. We meet them on the Golden Hour specifically. The last important thing I want to mention about this interaction with Misha is that when we entered the dreamscape, we were supposed to go to the Reverie first. In fact, later on in the story, we find out that it was a very, very serious problem why we didn't go to the Reverie. And part of the reason why we didn't go into the Reverie is because there are literally problems with the Reverie in the dreamscape. This bellboy, who works at the hotel supposedly, should know about this, right? This bellboy who knows so much about the dream realm, who knows all of these different things, who helps out everybody, who works at the hotel, they claim to not know why we can't go to the Reverie or why we're not supposed to go there. I call bullshit. I really do not believe for a second that bellboy here does not know why we can't go to the Reverie, because it was very obvious why. It was sinking into the dreamscape too much and it was at risk. This is something that the people that work at the hotel should know very well and are keeping a bit of a secret, right? That's the way it should be. So Misha has the same interaction with Himiko, Welt, and March 7th, according to all of them, and they were able to get to the places they wanted to go, but we were directed to the Golden Hour for some interesting reason. It's also rather interesting that the entire Astral Express entered the Dreamscape at the exact same time, and yet every single member of the Astral Express shared the same experience with Misha that we had here, just in a slightly different way, because they all went to a different dream. How was this little bellboy here at 4 different places at the exact same time? There's a lot more to this bellboy here than meets the eye. I've even heard some people speculating that Misha's little golden watch that just so happens to turn into Clockie whenever they want it to can potentially stop time, which I would totally believe because that's the only way that this makes any sense. How could they do all of these different things, just one bellboy doing all of these different things, if they didn't have the ability to potentially stop time or manipulate time in some way? They are, after all, a real watchmaker. Misha, whether you want to believe is the watchmaker or not, in Misha's lore is described to literally be a watchmaker. Whether you want to believe they're the real watchmaker or not is up to you. Upon further inspection, it appears that Misha's technique can actually stop time. In fact, Albert says that this technique stops time in Misha's promotional trailer. So we have proof now that Misha can manipulate time. Now, some of you might not believe me when I say that March 7th, Himiko and Welt likely did meet Misha, and that's because it's not exactly easy to notice, but let me try to prove that to you now. March 7th and Himiko and Welt described that they went through a mirror when they first entered into the dreamscape, just like we did, and then they entered into a long hallway, and Welt described that hallway's name as being the Gallery of Thoughts. He said that the hotel staff told him that. The only hotel staff we've ever seen in the dreamscape was none other than Misha in that exact same hallway that we met Misha in, and it was literally called the Gallery of Thoughts. So it seems like March 7th, Welt and Himiko can see and have likely met Misha, but it doesn't seem like everybody can see Misha. For example, we know that Firefly couldn't see Clockie, but it seems like Firefly couldn't see Misha either. When we're in the Golden Hour and we help save Acheron and Misha from some gangsters, for some reason Firefly says something very, very strange. We are given 3 dialogue options. Isn't that Misha? Isn't that Acheron? But if we choose the third option, how come they are all people I know? Firefly replies by saying, "What do you mean by all?" As if to say she can only see one person there. And Firefly doesn't ever acknowledge that Misha is there at all. She does acknowledge Acheron and can see Acheron, and she does know that we are there to help somebody, but she doesn't know that we're there to help 2 people. Clockie, my favorite character in the entire goddamn game right now, might have an explanation for this, because according to Clockie, they are only visible to those with the innocence, kindness, and honesty of a child, like the main character, and likely like the rest of the Astral Express as well. So a character like Firefly, who has been doing practically nothing but lie the entire time that we spent with them, probably can't see a character like Clockie or Misha, but a character like Acheron, who could sense Clockie's presence and seemingly was there to help protect Misha, like she's done in the past with other characters, might not necessarily be as bad of a character as you think, because despite her age, she seemingly can at least sense the presence of these people and might even have been able to see Misha, but Firefly, a liar, could not. Another interesting thing to point out about Misha's pocket watch, also known as Clockie, is that there are over 1,000 episodes of the Clockie TV show, and that Firefly is the one that points this out to us. So Firefly can at least see the Clockie TV show, but can't literally see Clockie, it seems. But more importantly, if there are over 1,000 episodes of the Clockie TV show, it likely took a while for that to become the case, right? So it seems like there's a track record of Misha existing for seemingly a long period of time, at least long enough to be mature enough to create a pocket watch named Clockie and end up literally creating it with their imagination through their dreams, and then also having established themselves for long enough for there to be over 1,000 episodes of the Clockie TV show. Now, you could just sort of say, oh, they made it up in like a night and there's just 1,000 episodes of it because it's a dream, so you kind of hand wave with magic that away, but to me, it sort of describes that Misha might be older than just some young bellboy, and this kind of gives a little bit of value to that idea that potentially Misha might be able to manipulate time in some way, especially that they are a watchmaker. Not necessarily literally the watchmaker, but Misha is a watchmaker. Now, we could be talking all day about the different connections between Misha's story lore and the different things in the Dreamscape that could potentially link the watchmaker to them, but some of them are a little bit loose. So I want to point out two important things that I think are worth talking about. One of them is sort of a generalized statement that all throughout Misha's story lore, Misha is able to actually bring to life these inanimate objects, such as teacups, teapots, and all these different clocks and all these different things that you see around the Dreamscape as well. They have this floating, almost lifelike appearance to them, and this is the exact same thing that's described in Misha's lore. And in Misha's lore, Misha is the one who made these things this way. And it is described that Misha is sort of creating this world in their story lore, just like the world that is created in the Penacony Dreamscapes. It's basically being told to us that Misha has created a world, several different worlds, that are just like these different dreamscapes. And there's 12 different dreamscapes on Penacony. The last things that I wanted to point out about Misha's story lore involve potentially something that likely ties Misha with Akivili, believe it or not, or at the very least, former members of the Astral Express. And I'll get into that in just a moment. I'm just going to read you this very last part of the very last section of Misha's story lore. It reads, "Farewell, Captain Misha. May our paths cross again." By the way, captain is a leadership role. Why would a bellboy of sorts be a captain? Anyways, let's move forward. All his companions left except for his ever-excited first mate, Mr. Pocketwatch, and the gentle Miss Mirror. By the way, I want to go find this mirror in the Dreamscape if it's there, because I think it would be potentially very valuable and very cool. It's probably going to be hard to find, so I might not do it for this video. But anyways, moving forward. They had navigated through the mists and across the sea together. That last part, the sea together, it's very important because Black Swan told us that the sea is representative of the Dreamscape itself. In fact, when you enter the Dreamscape, you always see the deep sea every single time. And the Dreamscape is sinking further into the sea, which is putting it at risk. Anyways, let's move forward. In crucial moments, Misha had steered their ship in the right direction. Now, the child named Misha would embark to build a new kingdom on a new continent until the opportunity arose for another journey. The way I read that is that these different journeys on these different continents are the different dreamscapes that Misha created. There's now 12 of them. Let's continue forward. If I'm to draw something else, my next creation will be about the adventures in the new world. As he finished the last stroke, he sensed some kind of familiar sound paired with vibrations, as if a colossal being had emerged from the depths of the universe and landed outside the hotel. He dropped his brushes, opened the door, and ran out. Welcome to the Astral Express, glistening in the morning light, tiredly, proudly, waiting there, parked and quiet, just like in the dream. Now, the reason why I think this has something to do with Akivili is because I don't perceive this as the current Astral Express crew. I perceive this as the former Astral Express crew, because he's in the middle of making all these different dreamscapes, right? So it doesn't seem like this was in present day. It seems like this was past tense. And another reason I think that is because Akivili has a dream on Penacony. We know that Akivili is on Penacony because we enter one of Akivili's dreams through one of Akivili's memories. That wouldn't exist on Penacony, more than likely, unless Akivili was there at some point in their life. So it seems very likely the Astral Express has been to Penacony before, and likely Akivili was on Penacony at some point, or at the very least, a former member or a former group of the Astral Express, which is told to us in this story lore for Misha, which the story lore for Misha is actually really, really deep in comparison to some of the other characters in this game. The last thing I want to mention about Misha before we close this whole thing out is that many of you might be thinking about Misha's grandfather and how Misha's grandfather could potentially be the watchmaker in question. But I want to point something out here. At the beginning of Misha's lore, Misha's grandfather is a very important figure to Misha and inspires Misha to potentially seek out an adventure amongst the stars, like his grandfather would. But throughout all of Misha's lore, Misha's grandfather is not present. They're constantly waiting for their grandfather to return home. But by the end of Misha's story lore, Misha does not really seem to care or really put too much effort into waiting for Misha's grandfather to come back, because it's been a very, very long time now since Misha's grandfather has been gone. So it's kind of assumed at this time that Misha's grandfather will no longer return. And Misha has sort of moved on past this and likely is potentially not the actual watchmaker in question, because if Misha's grandfather was the watchmaker in question, they've been gone for a very, very long time. And Misha has been making all of these different dreams and building all these different, dreamscapes all along the way. Even if Misha's grandfather started this whole thing to a degree, Misha has seemingly taken over all of it by this point in time. So I just wanted to point that out for all of those that probably were very intuitive in wondering about Misha's grandfather. And I'm wondering the same thing too, but it just doesn't seem very likely. We don't seem to have a lot of evidence for that at this time. If there's anything you take from this video, please let it be this. Especially on Penacony, don't judge a book by its cover. If you enjoyed this, consider leaving a like and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this, any other ideas you have in the comments. Constructive criticism is always appreciated as well, and I'll see you in the never-ending dream. Peace out.